Hi, my name is Vicky Wishay and welcome to a Wealthy Life podcast. This is episode 124 and I am joined again by the wonderful Cyril Thomas. You'll have heard about his entrepreneurial spirit and everything that he's involved in earlier episodes. And this time I've grilled him on how and I suppose why he got into commercial development. And I think it's really the bottom line here is about creative thinking and how that can make a difference for you. Spotting an opportunity and then being able to turn that opportunity into success. That's where the skill lies. You're going to love this episode. Cyril is an absolutely great guy. Make sure that you connect with him. All his details are in the show notes. Take care and enjoy. Hello and welcome. I'm Vicky Wishay, and if you're watching on YouTube, you will see I am back with the fabulous Cyril Thomas. This is his third visit, and I knew that there was more to get out of Cyril. So I invited him back, and he very kindly has said yes. Cyril, thank you so much for giving me more of your time.
Hello, Vicky. Thanks for having me back. I'm actually quite excited about speaking to you again. I never knew I'd like being interviewed on a podcast, but you were so welcoming and yeah, I think it was quite a humbling experience last time around.
Oh, bless you. You'll turn into some like podcast guest junkie now.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, listen, think of another topic and I'll have you back again because I love chatting to you. You're a man full of information. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that you've got all of these notes down in the show notes so that you can connect back up with the other episodes. But specifically what I wanted to get Cyril back for this time is to talk about commercial. So he does commercial investment. And what I'm really interested in, and I actually don't know the answer to this question because I asked him not to tell me, so it'll be a surprise for me, is what is it that makes someone stop doing what they were doing and do something else? And if you've listened to anything else that I have recorded with Cyril, and I'm a bit rude, I don't mean this rudely, but Cyril's a bit of a nutter stroke entrepreneur. So I mean nutter in that he's crazy and I love crazy people. But when you listen to what he talks about, his journey about this happened and then I was at university and I did laptops and then I did this and then I did that. He's a man who spots opportunities. And so I want to know, how do you spot opportunities, or how's your brain working and why did you make this change? Because from that I think we can all learn. So that's my goal for today, is to sort of like do a living autopsy, I don't know that's the right word, but a living dissection of Cyril's brain as to why he went from HMOs, which is a perfectly decent strategy in its own right, over to commercials. So I've given you enough chance there to think of the answer, Cyril. What made you change? So what were you doing? What was the last deal that you were doing just before you got to commercial, and how did this then commercial deal come about?
Oh, very good question. What was the last deal that I was doing just before I went to commercial? The truth of the matter is I don't remember. I know I was in my double digits in the HMOs, and I tend to specialize anywhere between 4 to 6 rooms in the HMOs. So it would have been probably a 5 or 6 room HMO that I had just recently completed. And I do recall going past a property which was quite close to the office that I was currently renting out. It was one of those service offices suites, you know, the ones where there's quite a few different businesses operating out the same, I suppose, environment, same property. And I was there for several years, and I realized that, you know, it's about time that I purchased my own office, but I wasn't quite sure how to go about it. And then I was going past a building which was 2 minutes away from this service office accommodation. It was an old pub, and I believe there was a for sale sign on it, and I saw it. And before I went in, I actually said, I'm going to make some inquiries. So I called a few local friends and said, you know, have you not seen this deal? What's the story behind it? Because it's been on there what seems like quite a while. And it just seems like it's a bit overpriced as well. So the feedback I got from my contacts was, yeah, the lady in there is very stubborn. You know, she doesn't really want to entertain any offers, any deals, etc. And she's a very stern Irish lady, you know, probably in around her 70s. She doesn't really like agents much. So when you go there, you know, dress down a bit and don't look too sharp.
Yeah, take off the suit.
take off the suit. And you know me, I never really take off the suit unless I really have to. So I did go and knock on the door. It was a pub, and it was in an area which I would call it. It was an up and coming area, an area which I believe has a lot of promise, but I believe I could still get a good deal if structured correctly. So as I knocked on the door, an old Irish lady, or I suppose an elderly Irish lady, opened the door, and she said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Oh, my name's Cyril Thomas." And she said, "Oh, you're one of those agents, aren't you?" I said, not necessarily. Yes, I am into property, and I've been functioning in this area for quite a while, but yeah, I'm interested in your property. And I said, "What's your name?" And she said, uh, "Angela Thompson." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. So your first name is actually the name of my wife, and your surname is similar to my surname." And interestingly enough, she then looked at me and she probably thought, this guy's a bit wacky. What's he saying right now? But something led her to say, "Do you want to come upstairs for some tea?" So at that point, I'm not a tea drinker. I don't drink hot drinks. But I said, "Yeah, of course I'd come up for some tea." So I went upstairs with her. She sat me down. I think there was a cat going around the place. The property did look a little bit knackered. I should back up slightly because before we went upstairs, the building which I'm talking about, like I mentioned, was an old pub. And I do recall a few friends saying that there was some important sports going on at that point in time. And when I walked in, on the TV that was being played, there was something on, but it was not sports. And I do recall saying to the lady, "Why are you not playing this match? It's apparently quite an important match." She says, "Oh, I don't quite like football."
Oh, okay, so it doesn't matter that all the people in the pub like it, and it might be
Yeah.
more okay.
And at that point, I realized, okay, I can see what's happening here. But I thought,
Yeah,
it's not my job to be a consultant. So I
no.
went upstairs and we had some tea, and she brought out this cup, which when you looked into the cup, you'd be mindful to drink from it. But I did continue to bring it to my mouth and from my mouth through the conversation. Lovely lady, by the way, lovely lady. She's since passed. But she was telling me about the property and telling me why it's been on the market for so long, and then explained to me that she wanted to now move to, I don't know if it was Greece or one of the islands somewhere. Um, she wanted to move away from London, the UK, for some reason, and actually she believes it's now time for her to make a decision. So I believe she had a lot of offers that had been put her way, but she declined. And I think the property was on the market for something like 275,000 back then, something like that, or maybe 250. I managed to put an offer in which was around a 170 mark or so, which
Wow.
you would say is quite far below the actual amount. I believe we ended up settling around the 200 mark. Now, here's where my mind gets a bit fuzzy because this deal was several deals back, but it would have been around the 200 mark,
Yeah.
which would have been still significantly lower than what other people had offered her. I didn't think she was going to accept it, but the vision I saw for the property is that it was a pub, and at that point in time, there was permitted development to convert pubs to offices. I didn't need anything but an office, but I also saw the potential of the fact that the flat upstairs was quite large, and my calculations showed that I could potentially get a 5-bedroom HMO upstairs. So if I could,
Wow.
yeah, and these are it's a decent size HMOs. That would have been
Mm.
2 single bedrooms of decent size and 2 ensuite bedrooms of decent size and 1 double bedroom. So I did my calculations and I realized that off of the HMO alone, I could run the whole building. All expenses would be paid by the HMO. I
Yeah.
already had experience in running a HMO, so that wouldn't be an issue. It would have been a licensable HMO, but that also wouldn't have been an issue. So, I spoke to her and I walked away from the situation thinking, well, at least we got on well. She said she'll get back to me in regards to the actual offer. And she did get back to me, and her decision was that she was going to go ahead with it. Now, I had never bought a commercial property before, and I wanted the office, what was an office then, the pub. I wanted the pub to convert to an office. But when I looked more into the actual permitted development aspect of things, I realized that you couldn't quite get an office out of it straight away, but you could get a letting agent. So I said, okay,
Okay.
interesting. So you could actually convert it, a pub, to a letting agent back then without needing planning permission.
Okay. And that's
Yeah.
because of the rules of permitted development and classes of buildings and
Change of use, that classes, all of that sort of stuff. Now, I never put myself out there to be an expert in those areas, but it was easy enough to realize that from a pub to a letting agent, the difference between a letting agent and an office is just a few stickers in the window. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not like you're not in property anyway, and therefore managing your own properties.
Precisely. So when she got back to me and said, okay, do you know what, Cyril? I don't want to move straight away, but I want to be moving within the next, let's say, year or so. And I said, okay, that's interesting. So on that basis, have you got somewhere to live other than upstairs? And she did say she got family, etc. So I said, okay, this is going to be a bit difficult for me to fund because, you know, it's a pub that I'm going to need to go through the process of the change of use and all that stuff. And I'm going to need to convert upstairs into an accommodation which suits what I'm trying to do. Yeah. Would you consider a thing? Well, I didn't actually use the term lease option, but I basically offered her a lease option. And that was me saying to her, if I took the property from you today and paid you X amount, would you move out on the basis that within this time frame, I would aim to complete the purchase? And interestingly enough, she said yes. So I paid her a small fee up front, and I continued to pay her on a monthly basis. I'd done the conversions on the HMO. I got that let out straight away. Once that was let out, I then turned my attention to the pub, converted it from the pub to two decent sized offices, and then realized that, yeah, actually, I do need a property management agent now because I had enough properties under, I suppose, my management for me to call myself an actual letting agent or property manager. We had also started, I suppose, managing estates and blocks of apartments by then. So it just was a natural fit. So I took one of the offices and made it I put it in use for an estate agency, a letting agency. We were doing buying and selling, but that was only on our own behalf.
Yeah.
And then the other office I used as my office for a number of years. It ended up being a fantastic deal because, you know, we funded the deal. We ended up only having to pay, it was negotiated in the end, so we ended up only having to pay 175,000.
Okay.
And that was because we noticed a few things, abnormalities with the basement and a few other bits, which when I went back to her with, she said, to be honest, you know, I should have mentioned it. But yeah, these are things that have been a concern of mine for a little while. They weren't too much of a concern for me, but I did need to address those things. So it ended up being quite a decent deal because I think by the time we went to get it funded, they valued it around the 300,000 mark. So,
and this is the thing about either buying up front with cash or doing lease options or exchanging it, you know, doing completions, etc. is just that. But fascinated out of this, how, I mean, if you think about it, like the facts are, she wanted, say, 275 and you ended up paying 175, all because she'd got the same name as your wife. You know, that bit that there's, I'm sure you're sort of glossing over some of the bits just maybe from memory or whatever, or give me the short version, but that piece of you connecting with her and why she chose you out of all of the others, and what have the others done that they put her off in such a way. I think sometimes when you're getting into these deals is having those conversations with the vendors, finding out what their circumstances are and how you can help them, because if someone's saying they want to move, they usually want to move. They don't usually employ an estate agent just for the fun of it, you know. They have got a plan in mind, and it just needs someone to help them go that way.
Well, Vicky, you're right, you know, and you said it previously too. On your journey, you want to deal with people that you like, you know, and get on with. And if you speak to somebody, you know that they genuinely have your best interests at heart, but at the same time, they're being very transparent and upfront with you that they're seeking a win-win situation. Then if you're both winning, why not?
Yeah.
Now, with her situation, I since found out that the reason why she wanted to be out of that place was actually because she was dying.
Oh.
So you can imagine that the money involved in that situation was not her first priority. And I can only assume that she didn't really have many people around that she was wanting to leave her money to. And I found out soon after that there was quite a few people trying to get at her money, which is probably, again, why she thought, well, to be honest, maybe I like this chap. He seems like he knows what he's doing. He seems like he has a plan for the building. Let's just go with it. And that sort of thing has happened on a number of occasions where you just sit down, you have a conversation with somebody, and you realize that actually this could work for both of us. And to the outside world, it might look, oh, you got an amazing deal, maybe she didn't do that well out of it, but she was happy with what she got out of it. And even up to about 3 years later, because she didn't pass straight away, we were still on good talking terms. So she'll call me up at any time and say, oh, Cyril, there's some mail come through for this or that. And I'll be like, yeah, I'll put it on the side for you, do it to post it to you, etc. It was all quite cordial.
Yes. Yeah, it's important, isn't it? And again, at that moment when you first met her and she opened the door, you didn't know what her conditions were. I'm just buying a property at the moment from somebody, and from the moment that I put the offer in to now, we haven't quite completed, but we're about to in the next week or so. Her husband died a month ago. Suddenly, he's only young, not baby young, but young, and it's unexpected. And she's trying to just deal with all of this, and that's on her plate as well. So I think generally in life we just need to be nicer to one another, but certainly being nicer to one another in business as well. Like you say, a win-win is a bit of almost like a cliche in inverted commas, but it is that. How can we both get out of this what we need? You need something. What do you need? Right. Okay. This is honestly what I need. How can we find a way that we can both get what we want? That is what the word win-win means. But, without the cliche, that is the reality of how we could be doing and should be doing business, isn't it?
Very much so. Very much so. And I think one of the key elements there, though, is that, in order for me to be able to make that deal work, I had to have a certain knowledge base. So I just happened to know how to do lease options.
Yeah.
And I did know how to do exchange delay completions and a few other bits, but the lease option was the tool that I had to take out of my toolbox and use for that occasion without ever using the word lease option.
Yeah.
Now, I would not have known that if I hadn't studied how to make lease options work. So this is where I say, like, with things that you're doing as an educator, I find it myself that it's invaluable to your students, because if they can have the tools that enable them to go out to any deal and say, well, actually, I use this strategy for this deal, I use that strategy for that deal. You should see strategies as tools in your toolbox.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm quite interesting because I've never really been a fan of lease options. Probably like you, we probably learned about them around the same time. There just seemed bits that weren't necessarily always ethical, and I wasn't completely sure that some of the ways that some of them had been constructed, that they were ever going to follow through and be legal, let's say, at the other end of it. What made you choose, bearing in mind you knew about a delayed completion, what made you choose, and just to explain, exchange and delayed completion, if you bought a residential property, you exchange one day and you usually complete 30 days later. When we buy as investors, if we're buying an empty property, we would do a simultaneous exchange and completion because we don't need a gap in the middle for anybody to pack and move out. The place is already empty. If you do a delayed completion, you're just saying, I'm going to exchange today and I don't want to complete until, and then you say something that is obviously going to be longer than 30 days. Why did you not use that? Because that would have, the point of completion was very definitely a signing of the contracts. Yes, you'd have had to pay over 10%, but that could have been your upfront payment to her that you were paying monthly. So why did you go that route?
Yeah, so again, another simple answer, really. It was my first commercial deal. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. So was I willing to risk being in a situation where I had to complete on something where if something went wrong, it would be quite, at the time would have been quite a considerable amount to me. So I decided that a lease option, the risk involved is what I had invested up until that date. And I could stomach that rather than be on the hook for a whole lot more if things didn't go well. So I knew I could put my all into it. And I explained to her that, listen, if something goes wrong, then you're going to have a property that, has been renovated and I've done stuff to improve it, but I'm going to have to hand back the keys. Yeah. And that was a risk on her part. That was a risk on my part. With an exchange delay completion, it put more risk on what I was doing. On your side. I didn't think that was going to be necessary in that situation.
And presumably you used a very experienced solicitor to draw up that contract.
Yes, well, I sought out the best of solicitors. I wouldn't say solicitor. So when it comes to contracts and things like that, I'm quite meticulous. And, I went out there and I spoke to the industry names. So I won't mention them on here. So I read their manuals, I consulted with them, etc. Then I found somebody locally who had been doing lease options, and there's very few people out there actually who specialize in this. There's very few just who know what they're doing. But this was a chap who had been doing it for quite a while, and I'd known a number of people he had acted on behalf of. So I just went and saw him, and I sat down. I said, I need you to teach me about this stuff too, really and truly, because I know how it works in theory, but in order to be able to be confident about what I'm doing, I need to actually see. I need to see the documents. You need to take me through the documents.
Yes.
And when he took me through the documents, he was exchanging the difference between doing an lease option with an actual lease in place, and instead of a management agreement in place, which actually can make things even easier, but it works just the same to a certain degree. And then he taught me about the power of attorney and all of those documents. So when you talk about a lease option, there's actually several documents involved that you need to make sure you have in place in order for it to function correctly. And then you have to also think about your exit from the start. Because when you're going out there to look for your lender, someone who's going to fund the deal at the very end, well, actually, if you just go to a lender and say, well, I have this lease option that I want to exercise, there's going to be a lot of questions. And if you've missed out any one step throughout the way, the lender's just going to turn around and say, not for us.
And you have to declare that you've got a lease option to the lender. You can't just say, I want to buy this property.
You can do whatever you want to do. I just tried to go for the simplest route.
Right.
And the simplest route for me was to find lenders who are actually happy with lease options being in place and find out exactly what they will need from me at the end so that I put that in place from the beginning.
Very good. Very good. So just in this one story, what we've got is right at the front is how you speak to people and how you do business. Then we've got the whole aspect of communication. Then we've got the whole aspect of finding the right team. I suppose we could call that solicitor being a mini mentor in that speciality that you were looking for, and making sure that you got what the lender needed. So, you're looking at the picture. And then, of course, you've gone on to talk about the exit strategy, which is the lender, or it might be selling, or it might be having to give back, or whatever else. So it's quite clear here that communication, education, mentoring, teams is all really important. And I think what we maybe glossed over at the beginning is the maths, how much the maths mattered right at the beginning. Because looking at this deal, right from the beginning, two things could have happened. You could have gone and said hello, and Angela could have said, get stuffed. And then that would have been at the end of it. But because the conversation opened the door and you got a dodgy cup of tea and a dodgy cup, understanding the maths of it, which I know you're a bit of an Excel spreadsheet king like I am an Excel spreadsheet queen, but understanding the maths of it, knowing, for example, with your past experience that you can make a 5-bed and that upstairs would fund downstairs. So that mitigated the risk, because that's, for me, is one of the risks around commercial is what happens if that business leaves? That's 50% or potentially 100% of your building suddenly not occupied. Whereas we know there is housing demand. Commercial demand is more specific, would you say, in that the certain properties are going to need certain premises? If you'd made it into an estate agent, it wouldn't be easy to make it back to being a pub. And if it was a pub and you were trying to rent it to an estate agent, you'd have to do work to it. So, the not structure as in the building, but the layout of the premises have to suit the business that's coming in. The market has to be right. The mood in the economy has to be right. There's so much more involved. Do you find having, if we go a bit more broader into your experience now, having a commercial tenant more risky for you, less risky for you, more or less of a worry than just your regular HMO tenants?
Yeah, well, remember, at that point in time, I didn't have a commercial tenant because I was going to be the tenant of the commercial property.
Yeah.
At that point in time, I did not need to worry about whether or not I would be able to find a commercial tenant because I was still going to be dealing with residential tenants in the HMO above. It would only be subsequent commercial deals that I went into there where I would then now be dealing with commercial tenants. And thankfully, to date, never had an issue with commercial tenants. I don't think I've ever missed a payment from a commercial tenant before. Sometimes it's been slightly late and we've dealt with that, but it's always coming at the end.
Okay, so actually it feels the same, but I wonder if I wonder if because you're unusual, because you've got this entrepreneur background, that your understanding of business is much easier. So, in terms of the commercials that you've got, have you always taken them with a tenant in situ? Have you taken on any empty ones?
Okay, so the next commercial deal that happened after the pub was actually a commercial premises. There were garages on the ground floor, and they had 4 flats on top, 4 2-bedroom apartments on a leasehold. So, well, 4 leaseholds. Now, when I looked at that property, it was a 2-minute walk from the pub. And
Of
the
the
reason
same
why,
pub?
yeah, exactly. And the reason why I was interested in it, because behind it had parking for 20 cars. And it's an area,
Wow.
yeah. So, but it's in an area where there's no parking. It's very difficult. The pub has parking for just 2, maybe 3 cars if you want to sort of park on the pavement just in front of it too. But I knew that as my business grew, there would be a need for me to have more parking spaces. And I also looked at that deal and I thought, well, it's an interesting one because of the way it's laid out. It's in a very good location for what I'm trying to achieve. And if I could get the entire property, I wouldn't need to be concerned about anything that would happen in the area for the next couple of decades. So when I inquired about that particular one, the ground floor commercial was absolutely empty. And I wasn't going to have any access to the 4 flats on top because they were already on long leaseholds. But when I inquired, I found out that there was a few anomalies with the building. Anomaly number one was that there was a ground floor freehold with a flying freehold on top, where the 4 flats were on a flying freehold. Now, you can imagine trying to speak to a commercial lender or a bank about purchasing that property, and they say, well, flying freehold. So you've got 4 flats above commercial garages on the ground floor.
Yeah.
How are we going to make that work?
And does
Um,
one person own all of this, or is one person owning the 4 flats and one person owns the garage?
so one person owned the garage and the land around the building,
Right.
and another entity owned the 4 flats, and
Wow.
they were getting a ground rent for that. So, but the ground rent was minimal. I think it was something like £25 a year per flat.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I looked into the books with my accountant hat on, the accountant side of the degree, which I never completed, I went on to the other degree. I realised that they were charging in excess of £1,500 per year per flat for insurance. So if you do the maths, two
That's
bedroom flat, £1,500.
that's
As soon as I saw
huge.
that, I realized what their game was. Their game was obviously people being quite naive in regards to what their rights are. I had quite a bit of experience by then with dealing with leasehold management because I managed estates with leaseholds. One of the estates that I was managing at the time had 120 leasehold property, well, 48 leasehold flats, and the rest were houses. But it gave me enough experience to know how to read a lease and know how to apply certain things and know all about the tribunal, etc. So I said, okay, this is quite interesting. I contacted a few people to get a bit more information about the land. It turns out that there was also some title issues in regards to there was an access to the 20 parking spaces behind it. But with that access, it was actually on a separate freehold belonging to my neighbor.
Oh, good
So,
God.
so when I looked at it, I went and spoke to a good contact of mine, a business manager in Barclays, actually, because they helped fund the first property, even though some people think Barclays are very old-fashioned and don't really fund such deals. They were people's people back then, and
Yeah.
actually who funded that deal, he's around now. So I would still say if you've got the right individuals within the bank, then you can really make that work.
Yeah.
So I spoke to him and he said, Cyril, listen, there's no way that Barclays are going to give you funding for this deal. But if you're able to sort out these issues, yeah, I think you've got a good chance. So I put my thinking hat on and I went back to the freeholder of the ground floor, and I said, okay, listen, I can do this, but you know that there's going to be issues with any potential buyer of this property, because as soon as they start trying to get funding for it, all of the issues that I've uncovered, they're going to uncover too. You need to give this to me for, I think it was either 12 or 18 months or something like that, for me to sort out these issues and complete the purchase, basically a lease option. So I convinced him to do that. We got the legals done, and you wouldn't believe it. On the day that I just said I got the keys. The day that I got the keys, I went to the property to take the for sale sign down, and no, I was putting cameras up. I had taken the for sale sign down as soon as he agreed the lease option, but we hadn't even signed any of the paperwork.
Yeah.
So I didn't want anybody interrupting that. Then I was putting some cameras up around the property. I was actually just doing it with my own maintenance man. And a chap pulled up in his car and said, "Hi, do you know who owns these properties?" I said, "Yes." I actually said, "I do" at that point. I said, "Yeah, I own it now." And he said, "Oh, how did you manage to do that? I've been trying to get hold of these properties for months now. Like, who have you spoken to?" And I said to him, I said, it's all done and dusted now. How can I help you? He said, "Oh, well, if I can't purchase it, then I'm very much interested in letting out one of the garages." I said, "Okay, I'm not really interested in renting out the garages right now. I've got my own use for them." Because in my mind, I was thinking, well, as the property business was expanding, use the garages for storage and a few other bits, which I need to sort of attend to, whilst then figuring out a plan for my wider vision for the property, which was buy the flying freehold and unite the property again. So the chap then turned around and said, "No, I really want this garage. And to show you how serious I am, I will pay you 12 months in advance."
Okay.
So I'm still just putting up the cameras, and it's like the first day that I've got the keys, and he's offering me 12 months rent in advance. And he said, "How much would you take for the rent?" So I just looked at the cost of the whole building, the cost it was going to cost me to run the whole building. I added something like 20% on top of that. And I said, well, my logic was that if I could fund the whole building off of half of the building, similar to the pub, then I don't need to worry about how long it takes for me to sort out the rest of it.
Anything else? Yeah.
Exactly. Well, he turned around and said yes to the figure. 12 months in advance with a deposit as well on top.
Nice.
Because I didn't know him from anywhere, and I really wanted to know if this guy was serious and how serious he was, etc. When I said, if we're going to do this all through the solicitors, I don't accept cash, I don't do any of that stuff, so it needs to be done properly and a lease needs to be drawn up. I had my lease option guy draw up a lease for the half of the building and put it in place. This was several years ago, and till today he is still my tenant in that part of the garage, and he's never missed a payment. Actually, we've had several increases in rent since then, and he's been perfectly fine. And I take my car there whenever I need a tire change or anything like that, and he treats me very well. So
Nice.
that's that part of the story. But in addition to that, I should say, next door, the half of the garage that I kept, I converted that into another office, because I realized that me being situated in the office in the pub was very visual, as in everybody could see me from the office. My car was parked there, people would just come in and say hello, etc. And when I'm sitting down working, I like to get work done. So I transferred all my stuff over to this side after converting it to an office, and I've literally been here ever since. So as we speak right now, I'm in that office, and I kept half of it at the back as a warehouse for all of the property management stuff.
Okay, so you're in your hidden office.
Yes.
What about the flying freehold? What happened there?
So we're going into detail now. So it is owned by an organization that is very well known for being very stubborn. They go around the whole of the UK, taking up these freeholds, and charging a lot of money to the leaseholders. Now, we went into battle. They sent me the first bill for the insurance, and I sent them a polite letter back saying, thank you for this bill, etc. But you do know that you're charging quite a lot more over the standard rate of insurance. And to prove it, here are 3 quotations that I have got that maybe you want to
consider.
And then all of a sudden, I received a lengthy letter back from their solicitor's office. You will do this and you will do that, and X, Y, and Z. And, it was just very, what I suppose most people call intimidating. At that point, it made me smile, and I thought, you have no idea where we're going with this, do you? So I sent back another message, and I said, you do know that I've contacted a few of the other leaseholders. Actually, I've now got data going back about 4 years in regards to what you've charged them. And I think you've actually charged them quite a lot more than you should have. And also, I'm not sure if you read the lease, but the lease actually states that all leaseholders should be charged equally. You're charging one flat 1,800, you're charging one flat 1,500. You're plucking these figures out of thin air, and these people are paying it. So do you actually know that you're in breach of the lease? This was several years ago. They sent back a message saying, listen, we're not in the wrong, and we're not admitting any liability, but we'll reduce the rates, something like 1,000 or was it 900? I said, no, we've got to try harder than that. They said, okay, we're going to come down to 700, but not because we're admitting liability, but because, we just want to work with you. I sent back a message saying, listen, I'm going to send over £150. That is for the insurance. If you choose not to insure it, that's on you. You're the freeholder. I've got my insurance quotes. Now, between you and me, Vicky, I went out and insured the entire building for about £500 to £600.
Yeah.
I just did it. I said, you know what? Because remember, I already own the ground floor. So when going to get insurance for a building, you don't really want to be telling the insurers that, okay, I'm going to be splitting the insurance. We only need insurance for the ground floor, but not the 4 flats above.
Yeah, because if anything happens to the 4 flats, it's going to affect the ground floor.
Exactly. So it was a no-brainer on my part. So, I sent this letter back to them and I said, listen, here's £150 and what do you want to do? They came back to me with a lengthy letter. But actually what happened was the lady from their law firm who was dealing with it, after a year of back and forward, she left. And then Vicky, the next lady who came in, she sent me exactly the same letter they first sent to me when they first contacted me.
Oh my God.
What did I do? I copied and pasted my response for the first time I responded. That went on for another year. She left. Another chap came in. He sent me the first.
Oh my God. You could make a TV program about that. That's
Vicky, if I tell you, we are 8 or 9 years deep and we're still doing the same thing.
Oh, you're not.
And I keep saying to them, I say, listen, just take me to the tribunal. Why are you resisting? But obviously they know that they're in the wrong.
Yeah.
And they spent up a lot of legal fees with this backwards and forwards. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I'd quite like the experience of going to the tribunal and taking these guys on, They're bullies. That's what they are.
Yes.
Get people to, I suppose, give in through lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
In this situation, the senior guys in the office, they don't want to touch it because they know that it's going to be quite burdensome. They're not going to get their fees paid and they're likely to fail in the situation because they've read it. So they keep giving it to the new person who joins.
Just to keep them occupied, to keep you occupied.
Yeah.
So you still don't own these 4 flats? You only own the garage?
When I own these 4 flats, I'll call you up and I'll let you know because
we'll have another podcast about it.
Yeah. But having said that, I'm doing whatever I need to do with it. All I'm not doing is I'm not improving the frontage. So what I'd like to do is have the 4 flats up top. Oh, correction. I've since bought one of the flats.
Oh, what? Okay.
So now I'm one of the leaseholders.
Okay. So isn't there something here, and I'm very tenuous and I'm not a lawyer, that says that if the 4 leaseholders got together, can't you then force the freeholder to allow you, is it a management buyout or something?
Yes, definitely so. So you're talking about enfranchisement. So with enfranchisement, yes, if there's 50% or more, I believe, of the property, you can definitely do that. And we've done that in situations. We've also done the right to manage, etc. too. In this situation, it's not applicable because there's hardly any service charge fees given the structure of the building. But the issue is that the ground floor commercial actually takes up more than 1/3 of the property. I think 1/3 is the quota, and that changes things slightly. So there are ways around.
But because that's not part of the flying freehold, but it is part of the
property.
Yes.
There are ways around it. To be honest, if I really wanted to devote all my attention to it, I could actually do stuff. It would involve a few, tricks, but it can be done.
Yeah.
But it's just not top priority because I've got the rent coming in, I've got the office, and those guys. It's actually I find it quite
funny. Yeah. So basically, you haven't paid the insurance in 8 years or something.
Every single year.
You bought your own insurance, but you haven't paid
no,
theirs.
every single year I send them £150.
And they cash it.
I send it to them by bags.
Yeah, okay. So that they're accepting 150.
They've never sent it back.
They wanted 1,000, so you're saving watch loads, even though you're then paying the 500 odd to do the whole building. So you're still in a win-win, but you're playing this ridiculous. I don't think I have ever heard a story like that. So I mean, that's just beyond crazy, beyond crazy. Okay, so that question and that excellent story came out of have you taken the property empty, and therefore I think what I got out of that is even when they're empty, not everybody's going to have someone walk up and go, I wanted it, but you went through all the checks with the person and you took them on, and that's fine, and you're just so happens that they're there. Have you got any stories of a commercial client that it didn't work with either the commercial business went down and you got in trouble because they had to leave, or anything like that? Have you got any a horror story?
Vicky, what I would do is because I do feel it's going to be value for your community. There's one part which I left out about that story, and it's not necessarily a horror part at all. You know the strip of land on the side that accesses the
parking around the back
places?
Yeah,
that's right. So I needed that strip to be part of my title, and I since found out that the next door neighbour, which was also it was a very large commercial premises owned by a car company, they were wanting to sell it as well. So I structured a deal with the agents there where I basically, well, I think it was actually the owner. I managed to find the owner. So I went directly to him and I said, listen, let me find a buyer for your property. So upon speaking to him, he was quite open to me taking over because he knew that I purchased next door. So I made a few phone calls. And this is, you know, when they say the power of your network. And Vicky, I know you know this because you run a community, you know, you organize a community. I made a few phone calls and I managed to secure the property at a decent price. It wasn't heavily below market value, I must say, but it was a decent price. And I managed to convince a local car guy who we've since become very good friends. I met the car guy in the service offices that I used to work in. So he used to be on the ground floor and he was working at one of those service offices, and he used to work just as hard as me. So we'd both be there late. We'd always the last to leave the building. And I said to him, I said, listen, there's this deal around the corner. You can have your own forecourt, and you know, you can develop your mechanic and all of that stuff out of it rather than continuing to pinch people's parking spaces around the service offices. So he said, Cyril, you know, how much can you get it for? I said, listen, I think I can get it for 200k. He says, oh, Cyril, that's a bit steep. I said, what are you talking about, a bit steep? How much do you pay over here? I know exactly how much you pay. You'll be paying less than the mortgage. So he then said, you know, okay, Cyril, let's go for it. Anyway, the chap who was selling it said, actually, I want 205 for it. And this car guy said to me, you know, still £5 more. No way, I'm not doing it. I said, stop being silly. Look at the bigger picture. Anyway, he agreed to purchase it. But I said, listen, I'm only selling it to you on the condition that you see this little bit of land here that doesn't disrupt you because you've got no parking spaces at the back, but you've got this piece of land. I want it. And he said, oh, well, but still, it will be my land. I said, you didn't know you owned it until I told you you owned it. Anyway, he gave it to me, which sold it. So as a condition of that sale, I managed to get the piece of land on the side of my building, and he got that building. It's since doubled in value, so he's a very happy person, and he rents it out to another car company because actually his business has expanded so much that he now has to, I think he's like in a field with a massive what used to be a barn, which he's converted into a premises, etc. So again, that's just looking at a situation where it wasn't quite apparent how I was going to get that piece of land, but just by utilizing the network, I was able to put 2 and 2 together, because actually that 9 times out of 10 is where the money is. You seeing an issue and thinking, okay, which 2 people can I connect to solve this problem?
But also, again, your communication skills, having that relationship with the man in the service offices, and then spotting an opportunity for him. Again, back to that win-win idea. We've got one at the moment where between 2 properties is a fence that is bulging and unpleasant, and we want it changed. And we spoke to the owner, it's an HMO, spoke to the landlord, and they're saying they don't have the money to replace the fence, and they've also, not very helpfully, got a maintenance guy who is always like whispering in their ear saying, you don't need to do it, you don't need to do it. Well, we've sent the photos. The landlord agreed with us, but then this other person's interfering. And so in the end, what I did was I went, do you know what, why don't we, the fence needs straightening, so the boundary lines are all a bit wonky, and what if we measured how much this land is and we straighten up the fence? They got a quote that came in at £5,000. We've got a quote that's come in significantly less. We now have agreed to take a triangle of their land, straighten up all the fence. So we've got the fence we want replaced. We've got land back that's worth at least, if not more. So expanded our footprint, and then, you know, done the deal, and we're paying half the price that they would have paid, but we got what we wanted out of it. So it's those sort of creative options that you can come up with that make such a difference, isn't it?
A fantastic example there. A fantastic example.
Yeah. Oh, Cyril, I love talking to you. So look, apart from the fact in there you've got a whole little secret bit that we didn't discuss anywhere else about you managing estates and everything. So obviously we're going to have to come back to that at some point. But let's stick with the commercial for a minute. So we've got, it's almost as if these are like the core skills that you need, probably the core skills you need for any business, which is education, communication, a team that works with you, a mentor that guides you, and understanding the math. So I think we could probably apply that to any business. And that's the important thing, is to remember that property is a business. And so you need to apply these things. But if we were going to look at one other piece of advice that you've got for someone who wants to get into commercials, or has been inspired by possibly even the lease option side of stuff, whatever it is, that, or the more creative way of thinking, because although you're using a lease option and that, you're not talking about that, you're talking about, let me take control of this property. So you're asking the owner to give you control so that you can do something, so that they can have what they want out the other end of it. What about another piece of advice that is maybe a bit more specific to property stuff?
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, you're asking me to give a bit of information or advice to somebody who's looking at maybe potentially investing. You know, what would I advise them to do at this point of their career if they're quite new to it? If that's
not
question,
even if they're new to it, yeah, but just like if you were changing strategies or anything, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, I have done a few things in regards to how I've learned how to do stuff. So when I wanted to learn how to title split, I went on a title split course. And within about 1 month of me going on that course, I identified a property in my local area, bought it, and completed a successful title split. If I wanted to learn that by experience, it could have been a lot more expensive and taken a lot more time. I have done a number of things through experience, and it has managed to go the right way, but there's been a lot of hurdles upon the way. So my advice would always be that if there's a way in which you can fast track your learning, you know, if there's a way in which you can find an individual that you resonate with, and they are teaching strategies that you believe are going to be useful on your journey, I'll say jump right in. Right in. If you think it's reasonably priced and you think that the person, you can get on with it, with that person, then most certainly I would say hold that person close, you know, make them your confidant, and literally just try and embrace the relationship with that individual, because that individual will become invaluable to you. If I say now that there are so many people I can call at any point in time in the property industry if I'm struggling with a situation or a strategy, and to have people who specialize in certain areas around you that can teach you and take you on that journey so you don't need to make the mistakes that many of us have made, I think that's invaluable. And yeah. I guess why you may be asking that is because of what we do with Ps and accreditation, and the fact that you're now one of our accredited property educators, I believe you are.
Yes, I'm there. I just need to fill my my sheet out, my website page bit. But yes, I'm done. I'm there. I've passed.
Excellent, excellent. And you know, it shows commitment, because when you go out looking for who is the right educator, who can assist me in my journey, sometimes you just don't know where to start. There's so much noise out there, but it's so much easier if you start with people who are showing that they're trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
If someone's taking the time to go through a 6-month accreditation process, which actually makes them quite vulnerable because there's a probation period for 6 months where anyone can comment on their application. And if you're an organization that's not doing things in the right way or got skeletons in the closet, you're not going to want to go through that process. Somebody who's trying to do things the right way and is proud of what they've achieved, and they're going to go through that process and they're going to shout about it afterwards. So somebody like Vicky, who I've known for many years now, I say many years, 15 years or so.
Yeah.
I've not once heard a bad thing about Vicky. And this is not me to say that because I'm on her podcast. I'm on her podcast because I've not heard a bad thing about Vicky.
Oh, thanks, Cyril. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? How important either the formal mentoring, i.e., I'm going to pay you to be my mentor, or the informal mentoring by the people that you know and that you network with is so crucial to one's success. Having those people that you can call on, because it is a bit of a lonely business, this, unless you're actually in it with a specific partner, not your life partner, but like a specific business partner. We're doing these deals alone, and you can't be expected to know everything and learn everything. And so having all of this, but how important it is to, when you're then going to exchange money or work with people, is to know that connection. And you said somebody that you get on with. I think absolutely someone you get on with. If you don't have that personal relationship, then any education that comes out of that person's mouth to you will not land in the same way as if they are someone who you respect. And I'm not saying, all right, I won't work with you unless you respect me. It's not that, but there needs to be mutual respect. And I said to you right at the beginning, I only work with people I like. And that's a bit flippant, but if I don't connect with you, then I don't feel that I'm going to be able to help you in the same way as if I do connect with somebody else. And that doesn't mean to say brainwash, that doesn't mean to say we can't question one another, but it's also about the journey that you're on. I'm on a very specific journey. I'm very much, you work hard, you're much younger than me. I don't want to work hard. I love what I do. So when I do work, it doesn't feel hard, but I also want my holidays, as you well know. So it's if you're looking for a lifestyle that property can support, yay, I'm your girl. I'm living it. I've been doing it for years, blah, blah, blah. But if I'm not a lease option expert, I'm a bit suspicious still. I mean, I'm great to hear you having good stories, because I haven't really had anybody have good stories for me before. So that's great. I'm not a commercial expert, so it's good to hear your stories about that. That doesn't mean to say that I haven't, come across those, but that's not where my expertise lies. So I think it's really important that, as you say, someone who is prepared to stand up and be accounted for, someone who is doing what you want to do, but is further along on their journey, so that you can, like slipstream, fall in behind them and then not have them drag you. Hopefully in the
in
pedaling.
addition to that, though, it's like, Vicky, you've built up so many contacts over the years. You've got a chest full of mortgage advisors, lawyers, advice for any occasion. So if somebody can just give you a call and not have to go through all of that, not have to do all of that research, not have to think about, is this strategy that I've put together actually going to work? If it's going to be based on, well, actually, I've done this 10 times, here's what you need to do. You can go out a deal and be a lot more confident about approaching the potential project or deal.
And I also think that when you've got a network, if I introduce one of my clients to, like, one of my team, one of my network, there's something about that fact that I've passed them on. I'm not going to pass on anybody that I don't like, that I don't trust, that I don't think is authentic, because I wouldn't be working with them. So if I passed on to someone, to you, saying, oh, look, I've met this person, they're doing this. I know you don't do mentoring, Cyril, but could you just help them with this question? You would know, hopefully, because like and trust me, that actually the person I'm passing to, they would never get to you otherwise. They would never
And
get to it.
that does happen, you know, because Vicky, we spoke about this earlier. You said, you know, Cyril, do you do mentorship? Do you teach, etc.? And I said, no, formally, I don't. I don't. For the position I am within the industry, with the accreditation and PIB and the awards, etc., it would almost be a conflict of interest. But of course,
Yes,
if you
yes.
contacted me and said, Cyril, you know, I've got this deal, and this is an area which I have not really been involved in the past, but I know you have some expertise there. Of course, I'm going to give you some information about it, or help you as best as I can at that point in time, because we know and like each other.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the key, isn't it? That's the bit about, again, all of this, we start right the way back at the beginning of the conversation with Angela, and we finish now. And it is about relationships. It is about treating people with respect. It's doing business with respect. It's being open and honest about what you want, you know, within the brands, the umbrella of commercial sensibilities, and then looking at how you can create a solution. And that is the thing that I love about property. The fact that, you know, when I'm buying this property from someone whose partner's died, helping them out. I mean, obviously they died during the sale, but helping them out now, saying, I literally got, as soon as I heard that, I got in touch with my solicitor and I said to my solicitor, look, could you please go to the vendor solicitor and say, look, we understand that this has happened in your family. I'm here to do anything you want. If you want to wait, I'll wait. If you want to do an exchange with a delayed completion so that you know that I'm going to buy it, but you just don't want to finish with it, that's fine. You tell me how you want this to work now that I know your circumstances. And they're happy and they're grateful, and we're gonna carry on, because actually what they want to do is just get it all done in one go. But I thought, how could I know that someone's life partner had died and not at least reach out and go, you don't know me, but is there anything that I can do to make the bit that we're engaged with any easier for you? Why wouldn't you do that? I just think, you know, let's be nicer. I know that property people get such bad names, you know, estate agents get bad names. We're bound to be sharks. We're all evil. We're money grabbing. We're just trying to rob all of our tenants. And that's not true, because I bet there isn't one of your tenants, commercial or human, obviously I know there's humans in commercial, that would have a bad word to say about you. And yet you told that story of the flats, and that is a company that you know all over the country that is deliberately robbing I don't mean to be uneducated, but, you know, unwitting victims of a fraud. And that's horrific. That's horrific.
It's terrible, really. But, you know, this stuff, it happens all the time. And there's been quite a few people over the years who have sort of helped with this sort of situation, this similar situations where you do have landlords or, you know, these freeholders who are just entities that you will never get hold of a person to speak to as such, because nobody really wants to put their face to the entities. It's the case of letters, emails, etc. They hide behind these, I suppose, veils of corporate.
Yes.
You know, but at the end of the day, that's where the opportunity is too, because you can do the things that they can't.
Yeah.
You can see the things that they can't. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, they probably didn't even know that they were buying a flying freehold.
No.
Because it doesn't really say flying freehold on it. It's a freehold. But when you realize that it's not connected to the ground and you realize it's flying, that they probably had no idea. And if they did have an idea, it was probably more of a case of the initial person who set it up maybe was slightly untoward about how it went. And when he sold it on to this entity, it was on the basis of, here's the ground rent, but by the way, this insurance, or each flat is paying this amount, you can continue that. So
yeah. There's something not right there. It's interesting, isn't it? Cyril, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I'm pretty sure we need to have another conversation about managing estates at some point in the future. We won't give up on that. And obviously a big supporter of both the Investors Awards, and I know that you're very honoured to be one of your judges. I filled up my judges profile the other day. So going to be one of the judges at the Property Investor Award. and obviously delighted that I've passed my probation to be an accredited member. Thank you very much, of PEAS, the Property Education Accreditation.
Property Educators Accreditation Scheme.
That's it. Good. I knew it was nearly those words. Knew that, because we call it PEAS, don't we? So yes. Thank you. We need to get all of your links and all of your bits put up, but I have now learned I'm not going to ask you. You're too busy. I will go to your right-hand woman and deal with her, and I will get all of these links put up on the page, as well as links to our previous conversations, and look forward to seeing you in just a short while and speak to you again soon.
Excellent, Vicky, always a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Pleasure, Cyril. Loved it. And heaven help all of your future guests, podcast hosts that you're going to go and guest on now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So I think you'll agree we've had an amazing conversation together about property investing, and specifically about commercial properties, and the idea that you can spot an opportunity. I think the three things that come out of this conversation for me, and that I hope will add a little bit more whoosh to your life, is I think lying at the back of it, it's not necessarily in the right order that they came, but lying at the back of this, how important education is to have that knowledge stored in your head, so that when the opportunity comes, you can apply it. But sort of going in a bit more chronological order, it's the communications that were there. His ability to go and speak to that woman in a way that connected with her, that nobody else had spoken to her before. And then, having spoken to her, seen the property, then you can look at all the maths. There would have been some maths that would have come first, because if you knew the price, and the price was, say, for example, 500,000 or 1 million, you probably wouldn't have had the conversation. If your price was somewhere around about 200, because 1 million to 200 might be too big an ask. It depends. But you see, never say never. So I think the three lessons out of this are education, and with that specifically understanding the maths of any business that you're in, and then great communication skills, and of course overlying all of that, as we've just spoken, creativity. So I hope we have put plenty of whoosh into your life. Please do like, comment, make sure that you follow Cyril. He's quite a shy guy online, but make sure that you connect with him. And I will see you in the next episode. Thank you very much for listening.